Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to come from the 6th chapter in the book of Nehemiah. Now, in the first chapter, we read that Nehemiah was the Persian Emperor Artaxerxes' cupbearer, and he is moved by reports of the conditions of his beloved city Jerusalem, which prompts him to request that he return at the sovereign's permission to rebuild the wall. And in the second chapter, we visit him visiting and inspecting. And then it's not until the 4th chapter that we really meet the opposition, the principal antagonist of which are Sanballat, a Samaritan, and Tobiah, an Ammonite. And then in the 5th chapter, we also read of internal oppositions. The 6th very much continues on the external oppositions, but there's also an internal opposition. There's murmurings and naysaying and murmurings amongst the people of Judah. And Nehemiah defends his position in light of the former governors who say, I accept no money, my food allowance has been left untouched, unlike the governors who came before me. So even though he had provided them more prudent and wise leadership and was in the midst of completing a monumental task that none of these other governors even had the ambition or sight to see that what needed to be done. So he, from the start, was a more qualified governor, unlike his predecessors. So he was a layman, and this is going to come into play when we read of when one conspiring Jew compels him to hide in the temple and beyond the space beyond that which was designated for the layperson. And so the opening verse reads, And it came to be, when Sanballat and Tobiah and Geshem the Arab and the rest of our enemies heard that I had rebuilt the wall, and that there were no breaks left in it, though at that time I had not put up the doors in the gate. So the current state of the wall is virtually complete. The wall itself is, we read in the 4th chapter, it was halfway the intended height. By this chapter, it had progressed to all the way. But there's still one thing left undone, and that is the doors in the gates. The gates, now, a city that was completely surrounded by walls would have been impractical because there would be no entrance point. The people in it would starve to death because there would be no way they could get outside. So walls are for keeping people out, not for keeping people in, although certain walls have been constructed for that purpose. Perhaps most recently the Berlin Wall. And, of course, many demagogues of these days compare Trump's wall to the Berlin Wall, but they are opposite in person. And we also meet a new antagonist, Geshem the Arab. We read of the confederacy aligned against Judah, which came from nations such as Samaria from the north, Tobiah was an Ammonite from the west, and the Geshem the Arab was from the south. These were all nations that had combined in confederacy to conspire to disrupt and distort this monumental task that they didn't want to see done, because the presence of a city like Jerusalem able to protect itself and defend itself would have been threatening to them. That Sanballat and Geshem sent to me, saying, Come, let us meet together in the villages in the plain of Ono. But they were planning to do evil against me. Nehemiah he had discernment, so he could see that these people were up to no good. Why would they draw him out unless it was to intend to do him harm or injury? So as we read in his response, he says, I don't have the time for you people. You people have been nothing but a nuisance. Well, I've been trying to build something constructive and positive. Why should I stop this work? And the next verse reads, So I, that being Nehemiah, sent messengers to them, saying, I am doing a great work, and I am unable to come down. Why should the work cease while I leave it and come down to you? So he does not permit, the place and the progress of the wall being constructed does not permit an interruption at this crucial and critical moment. They're trying to lure him into a trap, and he does respond to them. He does oftentimes we read him paying no attention at all to their verbal ridicule and antagonisms, but instead offering his prayers up to Yahweh. But the question, he makes it clear that the task is great work, and he has no time for them. However, they sent me the same word 4 times, and I answered them the same time. There's a cycle of repetitivity here, where 4 times they refuse to relent. They continuously try to pressure him and lure him into their traps, and his answer is identical, or at least similar, to their overtures and their invitations. Then Sanballat sent his servants to me with an open letter in his hand, the same word, the 5th time. So if 4 doesn't do the trick, he's kind of hoping that the 5th one kind of does, but he had sent his servant to him, and this is going to be different in contents. And it was written, among the nations it has been heard, and Gashmu is saying that you and the Jews are planning to rebel, therefore you are rebuilding the wall, and you are to be their king, according to these words. So they're planting a lie in his head. One, he had the trust and confidence of the Persian emperor. He was there at his permission and at his request to go there. So he had been the Persian king who they're accusing him of rebelling and stimulating national revolt against. He had been in a position of trust and responsibility of him. So there's no there's no dignity to such an accusation, and smears and slanders and gossip are something we have to deal with in the Christian life. There are ways to respond properly, and there are ways to not, and we can read some of the ways, the positive models to follow for this unpleasant reality in the as the chapter progresses. And you have also appointed prophets to proclaim concerning you at Jerusalem, saying, a king is in Judah, and now these words are heard by the king. Therefore come now, and let us take counsel together. So they're making him aware of this in all likelihood, fabricated rumor, because there was to be no king in Judah ever since Zedekiah, and ever since the restoration of Israel as a nation. They have been a democracy, so Zedekiah was literally the last king who ever sat on the throne in Jerusalem. And Nehemiah, his ambitions were not selfish, they were selfless. He left a comfortable light at the court of the Persian emperor, and he did embrace this task, but not for any insidious motive that they were suggesting of hiring prophets to exalt him at the king, at whose very request and permission they were there. Then I sent to him, saying, there are no such matters done as you are saying, but you are inventing them in your own heart. So once more, his discernment becomes alive and well. He recognizes the falsehood and the lying nature, and where it originates from. It comes from their own perverted hearts, and they're selling him fiction. There's no reason for him to respond or come as requested, or there's no reason he's going to be so summoned by these unsavory and untrustworthy characters who are ostensibly offering to counsel him how to guide against this imaginary danger and threat, when the real threat is to draw him out in the open and, if possible, kill him, injure him, or harm him. For all of them were making us afraid, saying, let their hands slacken for the work, and it not be done, but now make my hand strong. So these are the contrary wishes of the Confederate conspiracy, the confederacy of the conspirators from all the nations to the north, west, and the east, and the south. The west would have been the Mediterranean Sea, so there would have been no nations to the west of Judah. And they want them to, they want their hands slackened to not do the work, But Nehemiah affirms that his hands are strong. They will do not only his hands, but the hands of the people. This was not a one-man project. It required a leadership, a single leader, but it was very much a team effort. So it was not only his hands that were strong, but he had a contagious strength and courage within him, which spread amongst the people who he had summoned to do this monumental task. And this was a difficult task, but he does manage to pull it off. And when I come to the house of Shemaiah, son of Delaiah, son of Methedbel, who was restrained, he said, "Let us meet together in the house of Elohim, inside the temple, and let us close the door of the temple, for they are coming to slay you. By night they are coming to slay you." So this is one of his own people suggesting or recommending or advising a course of action that can protect him from the people who are determined to kill him, and that involves going into the temple to a forbidden territory. King Uzziah, when he entered into the most sacred of precincts, was struck by leprosy when he dared to defy the law of Moses, and Nehemiah was very much aware of the law of Moses. He was not going to compromise the law of Moses for his own safety. And I said, "Should a man like me flee? And who is there like me who would go into the temple to save his life? I do not go in." So he's firm, resolute, and resolved to maintain his position at all hazard to his health, and his reputation would have been ruined forever if he had abandoned his people and looked after his own safety at this moment in time. He would have been in spite of the tremendous courage he had shown this far, this would have been a lapse of cowardice, which would forever tarnish his name. "And see, I perceive that Elohim had not sent him, but he spake this prophecy against me, because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him." Now we meet the external enemies in the 4th chapter, and we read there are internal opposition, if not necessarily enemies. But this is one who, by the craft and wiles of the two principal antagonists, Tobiah and Sanballat, had summoned to his to do his bidding, and because he was a hireling, that I should be afraid, and do so, and shall sin, and so that they may give me an evil name, to reproach me. So the difference between a hireling herder and the true and good shepherd is outlined most explicitly in John's 10th chapter. This internal enemy amongst the Jewish people was a hireling herder, and he wanted to lead him to safety, but it was actually counterproductive for him to seek safety at this moment in time, which demanded and summoned the fullness of his courage, and his reputation was at stake, and he did not want he recognized that it would have been a sin for him to hide at this moment in time, when his presence and contagious courage would have been better out in the open amongst his people, doing what he does among them while they were doing what he was doing. "My Elohim, remember Tobiah and Sanballat, according to these works of theirs, and the prophet Noadiah, and the rest of the prophets who would have made me afraid." So as per custom, Nehemiah was a deep man of prayer. He retreats to prayer to find the strength to overcome the situation, and he's asking he's asking Yahweh not to forget what Tobiah and Sanballat had done against him, because what they were doing against him was actually, in fact, against him, because he was there at the will, he was prompted by the will of Yahweh to petition the Persian king in the first place to be there to complete this necessary and monumental task. "And the wall was completed on the 25th of the month of Elu in 52 days. Now, other translations translate this, the month and the date, as October 2nd, but the 52 days in which it took to complete, now this seems almost frustrating in light of Trump's current endeavor to build the much-needed wall across the Rio Grande. And even though he hasn't, there's a lot of reasons why they were able to accomplish this task shorter. one, the Rio Grande is significantly larger than ancient cities were actually much smaller than they are today. So, and also they had an autocratic form of government. So he had the permission of the king, and there was certainly opposition, but there was no political obstructionist. Now we have a Republican form of government and a bipartisan system, and there is no length, there is no lie, there is nothing these Democrats won't do to obstruct the much-needed task. They tell us all sorts of lies. It won't work. History, science, and experience tell us that it can work and it will work. They're saying it won't work. It's just a waste of time. They depict it as an astronomical expenditure, the $5 billion needed, when in actual fact that's the oldest trick in the book. You present the plebs an astronomical figure which they compare to their salary, and but when in actual fact it will cost approximately $16 per citizen, maybe $32 for taxpayer, because remember 47% of this country is not in the tax-paying class at this moment in time. But he will get it done, maybe not by the midterm, but he will get it done. It is going up silently and suddenly and quietly. So that it's getting built in a lot of places. There's no this isn't a single task. It's coming up on its own in a variety of places, and we will live to see the wall completed. I have every faith and confidence that he will get it done. He is a man of action. He is a strategic genius who is smarter than any of his Democratic antagonists. And it came to be, when all our enemies heard, and all the nations around us saw, that they fell greatly in their own eyes, and knew that this work was done by our Elohim. So the nations all around them, who were all united in a confederacy of a conspiratorial confederacy to disrupt, distort, obstruct, or destroy the wall, they were now stricken in fear, and they knew that it was done in the power and in the name of Elohim and not apart from him. He was the secret to their strength. It was his will, and Nehemiah had just performed and completed it. In those days, the nobles of Judah also sent many letters to Tobiah, while those of Tobiah came to him. So there were people in positions of prominence and authority and respect within the Judean community who were in league with Tobiah, and they not only Tobiah but his minions. Tobiah is the secondary principal antagonist. The dubious distinction of the principal belongs to Sanballat, but there were traitors in the midst, and that's very much our situation with these Democrat obstructionists who don't want to see the wall get built because they need illegals here for their votes. They have no way to survive except by expanding their vote base. That's why we see all these ridiculous overtures to 16-year-olds and felons behind bars. They are trying to expand the electoral base because they know they don't have a shot in beating Trump in 2020, and they are pathologically obsessed with this man. But I'm going to discipline that tangent and read the 18th verse. For many in Judah were sworn to him, because he was the son-in-law of Shekinah, son of Era, and his daughter Johanna married the daughter of Meshullah, son of Berechiah. We have no idea who these names are, but we imagine that they would have been connected to the connection formed. They were people of prominence and in positions of the same, that they were able to because he had some sort of lineage connecting them to them through marriage, not by blood. They were in league with him. They were also speaking about his good deeds before me and reported my words to him. Tobiah sent letters to frighten me. So the entire purpose that Tobiah had authored these 5 letters was to frighten him in a task which calls for courage. Fear is the enemy. Fear is a great weapon of our spiritual enemy. Faith and fear are polar opposites. They cannot abide in the same vessel at the same time and simultaneous, or even any proportion at all. Either it's very much a case of man serving cannot serve two masters. He must despise one and love the other. And so we all have decisions to make: fear or faith. And the counsels of fear often seem attractive and they seem secure, but it is safer in the long run to respond in the response of faith. So everything we do as Christians is a faith building and faith-oriented exercise. And that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.